Hi, HR Nation. It's Chris Rainey. Welcome to HR Leaders, the show where we interview today's most successful and innovative HR practitioners 5 days a week. Today, we have a special guest on the show. We're joined by Glenn Jones, author, speaker, and HR consultant. Welcome to the show, Glenn. How are you?
Hey, Chris. I'm very well, thank you. And yourself?
Not too bad. I'm so happy that we are your first podcast and
Indeed.
video cast, I suppose, video podcast.
Yeah.
Combination of both.
Around the world as well. So you've nailed it first. Well done, Chris. And thank you very much for having me on the show.
No problem. No problem. Well, before we jump in, Glenn, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself personally and your journey to where we are today.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, I'm a freelance HR consultant and have been for the last 7 years. Had some great fun and some great education and some great opportunities over the last 7 years to work for some awesome companies around the world, ranging from Bank of America, HSBC, Ecolab, and my last client who was Imperial Brands. And I think for me, I've grown tremendously over the last 7 years to really sort of understand different companies. I think I'm up to sector number 16 now. So that's good fun.
That's impressive.
Oh, yeah. But there's still more to go. And also, for me, the roles that I try to cover off are anything from COO down through HR program and transformation leadership and management, both at a strategic and an operational point of view, into HR shared services and payroll. So it's pretty much not much I can't do, but equally every day is a learning day for me. So I enjoy tremendously what I do.
So just to be clear, again, you're working in these organizations as a HR practitioner on a contract basis.
Yeah, very much so. In so much that what I do is I tend to get parachuted into organizations and companies when things are going wrong. So whether it be technology bias to transformation program, or it's culture, or it's people, or it's an outsourced provision to someone like Accenture or NGA, because I've worked for those two as well. And therefore, I'm able to use the skills that I've got to repair, but not only repair, but to take it on to the next level then of what their evolution needs to be. And that's where I really get so much fun as well as coaching people and bringing people along with me at the same time.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because you're not just going in for a day, doing a session and you're out again. You're actually in these organizations for quite a significant amount of time, right?
No, that's correct, Chris. It's very much partnering, and that's
exactly.
It's really adding value to enable my clients who become partners, who become friends, and you could literally call them family as well because they feel like that in the end. But also really keeping a close eye on that, on my adding value constantly piece, so that you don't get comfortable with your feet under the table. It's constantly sort of looking at, well, am I doing what I should be doing for the client? And if not, then it's time to move on.
Fantastic. Well, look, one of the reasons I'm excited to have you on the show is you've just released a new book, right?
Yeah.
And I suppose, first of all, tell us the name of the book and what was the inspiration behind writing it?
Yeah, great question. Okay, so it's titled Human Resources Changes the World, How and Why HR and HR Directors Should Stand Up as Leaders in the 21st Century.
I'm glad you said it now. I think I would have got it wrong.
Yeah, actually, it was going to be called, the original title that I had before I was persuaded to change it by my publicist was HR Rocks. So, okay. But that was just felt to be like two 1970s. But
I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially for me, it was about why did I write the book? Oh gosh, where do I start? If you're passionate about something and you watch and you look at and something just doesn't happen, then sooner or later you have to stand up and be counted and do something about it. That's the sort of person I am, and that's the sort of person that I continue to be. So back about 4 years ago, the story is that I actually went to the University of Derby to look at something that I wanted to do for a PhD. So, and what I was getting frustrated about, Chris, was about the fact that actually when we talk about people as being the biggest component of any company or organization around the world, why the similar consistent mistakes were happening. What was HR's involvement in that? How influential were they being? What was the mindset? What behaviors did we have? And moreover, coming back to the people bit, well, if we say that people are important, why aren't HR directors becoming CEOs? Question mark. And what I wanted to do was really understand all of that, because the more and more I kept looking at it, the more and more I saw people like Dave Ulrich, the CIPD, bringing stuff out. But yes, they were talking about it, but nothing was actually tangibly, and I am being generalizing here, nothing tangibly was actually happening to really make the changes that needed to be happening for the 21st century. And I'll pause there and see if you come back with anything, if I may.
No, carry on. I'm intrigued even more now.
So what happened? So 4 years ago, University of Derby said to me, write 10,000 words on it. And as a freelance HR consultant, time is a premium. So I left it. But like every itch that itches and nags away, eventually I just felt that, that something had to happen. And about a year and a half ago, I was in Amsterdam airport, Schiphol, with a colleague of mine. And he said, well, why didn't you write a book? So I did. Now, let me be clear, because ultimately the book is not about being a critical person who's going to whinge on about HR. It's not about that. It's literally about, okay, so where is HR today? What are the blind spots that we see at CEO, at board, at HR level, at CIPD, and the relevant HR institutions around the world? And what can we do about it? What can we do, and what should we do about it for the 21st century to really make that change that lifts the function up now to be value add? Because daily, what I found, Chris, through the research for writing the book, was there were constant questions around the world, and you must get it here as well. Is HR dead?
It's something, we hear all the time,
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because what's then presenting that, if you get under the skin of it, it's more frustration around, okay, what should the HR North Star, as I call about in the book, what's the HR North Star for HR for the 21st century? Because I think what's tended to happen is the function is falling into paralysis and is using the same old stuff that's been used for many years. So innovation hasn't come through. Technology has. But if you look at, on the whole, what a HR function does today, and the research called this out, there's only 28% globally where there's true value add being recognized in HR. All of the other stuff is administration, policing, policing, etc. So what I wanted to do in the book is really bring that to front and center and say, okay, so what are the blind spots? What is it that HR is not able to do today? Why isn't it influential in the boardroom? Why are you starting to see this trend where HR directors aren't even in the boardroom? And what is happening? Coming back to the people element of the 21st century, yes, there's AI, yes, there's robotics, but there's still people around. So what was happening with HR, and why wasn't the relevant changes happening?
So when you was writing a book, what was some of doing your research? What was some of the biggest surprises that you came across? Because I always speak to people that write their books, and they always say there's always something that stands out while writing it. It was a surprise or something that they look back on as a big moment.
Well, actually, great question. What I wanted to be almost persuaded or look at, I wanted to be proven wrong. I wanted to be say actually there were HR directors becoming CEOs. And actually, the big surprise was actually there weren't.
Why is that?
Great. So the main reason is that actually there's probably a few. So one, actually, is it in the mindset today of HR that they can become CEOs? Do they have the relevant skills and influence and behaviors to enable them to get to it? There's also a perception that HR today doesn't add value. It really doesn't. I mean, and I'm generalizing here, Chris. Okay, so all my HR professionals out there, right, please don't shoot me, because ultimately I'm really doing this to help us all. And I am saying generally here, because there are some great examples of people who do become CEOs. But essentially, there's a lot of negativity towards HR, and I think also because of HR's mindset today, that's been allowed to happen as well. So where is the value in HR? What is it doing with regards to helping organizations and companies around the world to really, really push forward? But whilst recognizing there's a commercial point to it, but also a people point to it. And if there isn't a CEO or a board that has people at the heart of what they do, then what are they doing? Because ultimately it's their people that would deliver the relevant reputation and the relevant confidence in that organization. And they're just some of them. So mindset, behaviors, very much victim mentality, repeating the same stuff that's always been repeated, but not having the courage to actually go with the relevant data, the relevant thought process to influence in the boardroom to say, hey, I'm here not because I want a seat at the table, but because I deserve a seat at the table. That's the difference.
So what are some of the actionable insights that you share within the book then that can help these leaders on this journey and perhaps change those mindsets and create that and a set of skills, and I suppose give them themselves permission to achieve and become the CEO of an organization?
Absolutely. I mean, key to this, and some of the actions that I've given in the book are very varied. One thing I recognize, Chris, another light bulb moment, as you touched on, is that this isn't something that just has to change at one level. You know, before the show, we were talking about how HR people get into HR, or how people get into HR rather, and generally most people fall into it. It's ironic because what I looked at was what's happening in schools, what's happening in colleges and universities, what's happening with apprenticeship students, what's happening with HR institutions, what's happening with companies and boards, etc. And I go on and I go on. But the reality is that these changes need to happen at multiple levels. I'm very lucky. I'm chairman at my daughter's school, chair of board of directors at my daughter's school. So I'm able to go into the schools and talk to the young ladies in that school and say, okay, so what are you passionate about? And have you ever heard about HR? And invariably, everybody just looks at me blankly and goes, HR, what's that? What is that?
I have to explain to my friends what I do for a living. They're like, what do you mean? I'm like,
but you know what? It's quite ironic. One of my friends, actually, when I first got to know him, I said, oh, I work in HR. And he's a doctor, right? So he turned around and said, well, is that human remains?
Oh my God.
All right.
That's a terrible joke.
Yeah, I know, but true.
That's amazing, though. It's amazing.
Yeah. But I also came across another quote the other day, Chris, about that somebody made. This isn't me, okay, guys, everybody out there. Somebody said working in HR was a bit like walking in the park. It just so happens it's Jurassic Park, and the dinosaurs that are in it are HR. Now that's not me, okay? But this is an indicator, I think, Chris, and the book talks about this as well. So the change that needs to happen. What I looked at in the book is what are the behaviors of the great CEOs that are out there. No surprises, influence. I mean, some of the great CEOs around the world, even financial directors, are able to influence in the boardroom. They're able to put forward a compelling argument with regards to why we should make this change, why they should be included in this change. What is the importance of the data that we have? How can we translate that into meaningful things that enables something to be considered not only from a finance perspective, which is really important, but also from a people perspective, which is equally important. How many times have we seen in the past where there's been a change happen, a restructuring, a reorganization, which has always been done from a commercial perspective, but has then fallen foul in how it's been handled, what's happened to the people. The impact on the bottom line of getting something like that wrong is tremendous. And not only that, the reputational damage that it does to that organization is a killer these days. We've now got Glassdoor, which is a great tool for people to look at what they're going to go and work for, both from a pro and cons perspective. And get all of this wrong, Chris, as you know, and you get hurt by it.
Lose all your talent.
Yeah, well, everybody talks about the war for talent, even now in the 2018, and that few words has been around for many years now. But equally, it's that disconnect between what's the influence in the boardroom. So that's one of the things that.
How can HR leaders develop that then?
Well, again, it's about having confidence. It's a change of mindsets from fixed versus growth. So it's about learning. It's about the mindset of, instead of that victim mentality again of, actually, I want a seat at the table. Well, go and prove that you deserve that seat at the table. Use the data that you've got. Use commerciality to it as well. And what I'm saying is that not every HR director around the world will become or want to become a CEO, and that's fine. But one of the things I touched on in the book is there a glass ceiling in HR? So is it the perception that actually the best you can be is a HR director? And if so, why? It's quite interesting, Chris, because the other day I launched the book down in London, and I had the chance to meet quite a few people where I launched the book. And I actually asked that question to someone. They just got into HR. I said, so what do you want to aspire to? And she said, HR director. I said, but what about after that? And she went,
Haven't even thought about it.
great question.
Yeah. No, of course. And I think if I think about any of the roles that I've predominantly been in sales roles most of my career. And I at no point was I thinking CEO, where in fact, many CEOs come from the sales route.
Well, yeah.
Organizations as well. But it wasn't something that I think it comes down to a mindset, as you said. And understanding that as long as you're focused on your continuous growth and you give yourself permission to go for that goal, then you can achieve it.
Yeah, most definitely. And why not? And you'll learn some other skills that invariably weren't there before, like commerciality, like contract management, bit of sales, etc. And you might have to step outside of HR to go to into another function or into the broader business and then come back again, or conversely through somewhere else. But it's having that grounding in HR potentially to do it. I had a sort of great sort of article the other day that CJ Green of the CEO, CJ was a chief people person beforehand, and she actually made the jump without going anywhere else to become the CEO of Service. So, and she is probably one of the few people that I can put my hand on my heart and say, actually, someone's done that. And she did a great job as well, actually walking that forward. There's been a few other HRDs around the world, like Mary Barra, for instance, who was the General Motors CEO today. But saying that, Mary started her career in engineering, and then she went into HR, and then she became CEO of General Motors. But there are a few role models like that, and I suppose that's the other bit for me, Chris, is there are some really great role models out there in the HR world, some great HR directors. And we're not tapping into those as well, because invariably they are the shining lights of where HR is today. And it would be great to see a mentoring scheme set up whereby they could actually do that. And again, I call that out in the book. And I'm hoping that the likes of the CIPD, for instance, will grab onto that and maybe hook into that idea.
Mm-hmm. I think it's not going to be solved by a CIPD or another organization. It needs to be taken on board by the businesses themselves and the individuals in order to achieve this. Is that one of the goals of the book, to really help people achieve that in the organization, or is it really to open up the conversation of how we're going to achieve it together and what can we do to make it happen?
Yeah, so there are actionable steps. I mean, there's steps there. As I said, this is multi-level. So my intention is that the book should be read by CEOs. They should be read by boards to consider actually there is another option. The blueprint of CEO is very, very narrow right now. Who gets to become a CEO is very narrow. So for me, the actions are there for CEOs and boards to actually sort of understand there's another option here. It might need some work, it might need some faith, but actually there's an option there to demonstrate that. Also, there are actions for the likes of the HR institutions around the world to really sort of look at how are they developing people, what are the skills that they're presenting, what's the learning about that, what is this HR strategic North Star for today, and keep evolving that, because ultimately today what we're doing is being perceived as not adding value. So therefore, it should set out the roadmap of what that value should look like. So what is it's important? Is talent important? Yes, it is. Is recruiting the right people important? Is it engaging the workforce important? And if so, building a strategy around that to actually sort of drive the function forward. Of course, there will be other stuff on top of that, which will be pertinent to that organization. So that's at that level. Then it's coming down or into the HR profession in general. And it's really giving a confidence thing to say, actually, change the mindset. Instead of being fixed and isolated and introspective, push out, be bold, be brave, be courageous, and actually say, you've got value. You've got the information at your fingertips. Do something different, because ultimately different could actually add value to you. And not only that, when people start to say, well, HR adds no value, really hone back and say, actually, we do add value, and this is what we're doing to really sort of address some of the things that we've got.
So what are some of the things on that specific point that you say in the book to encourage them? Where do we start? Like, it's a lot to take in, right?
Well,
First and foremost,
yeah.
where's this? Where's the starting point? What does it look
Well,
like?
I think the starting position is really now. It's you know, most people hopefully read the book. If nothing else, from it they'll get something. If it's only the fact that actually I am valuable, actually HR does mean something. Will it be called HR in the future? Who knows? That's another story altogether. But actually recognizing that a HR professional today adds value is number one, because it's a confidence
Do
thing.
you not think they already know that they add value and they have the confidence, or do you think this is still really lacking?
No, I think it's lacking still. I mean, there was an interesting thread on LinkedIn a couple of days ago whereby it was basically saying, you know, and you take these comments, Chris, with a pinch of salt sometimes, yeah, that whenever someone goes to HR, they don't feel as though they're given a value service. So that's number one. I think in general, are HR people comfortable? I'd rather ask that question. Are you comfortable? And if you're comfortable, what does comfortable mean? Is it that I'm just doing the same old thing that I've done for 10, 15 years? Or am I being brave and bold and courageous and trying something new? And actually, when I look around, am I giving a service that's really adding value? Or am I just actually doing what I've always done? Question. And I'd love to probe that question, just have it in their mind around, okay, so where's the value add of what I do today? And not only to just ask themselves that, but ask the other functions around it to say, you know, this is who I think I am. And that's the beauty of the growth versus fixed mindset. Invariably, everybody will say, oh yeah, I've got a growth mindset. But unless they test themselves, they will never know, because, you know, humans being humans as we are.
Risk averse, right? They don't
Yeah,
want to put
yeah,
themselves out there, but unless you do that, you're not going to innovate and you're not going to grow. I think maybe I have a different perspective on it because I'm quite lucky that I speak to the HR leaders on the show every day that are pushing the boundaries,
yeah.
that
And
are, you know, challenging the status quo and not just continuing to do the same thing over and over again because that's the way they've always done it.
no, yeah.
Those are the kind of people we attract to what we do with our workshops and our clients and also the podcast. But I can certainly see from your perspective, and I agree. I'm sure there are leaders out there that's kind of going through the motions as opposed to really challenging what they're doing. They're challenging their business as well and also themselves personally.
Yeah, most definitely. And, you know, and I'm generalizing here. And Chris, you're in a great position because you tend to see people coming through who are really passionate about what they do and truly adding value. But, you know, we're talking about a global thing here as
Of
well.
course. Yeah, no, of course.
Yeah. And for me, you'll find that certain countries are far more advanced than others. And, you know, there's a divide there. But I think, you know, it's great that there are people out there who are passionate. But what I want to do is to say, people, read the book. And if you don't get anything from it, at least you've opened your eyes to something else. And if you tick the boxes and the questions that are at the end of the book, where I've left space to really sort of challenge yourself too, then at least, you know, if you've read it, great. If you take something from it, even better. If things change, fantastic. But I think we just all need to be brave and courageous and really take a look in the mirror and say, actually, are we truly adding value as a function? And if we're not, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah. And don't worry, I love the fact that you're posing that question to everyone. And I think it's important that we do that all the time and we constantly challenge ourselves. Because I even find myself, even though we're a startup and things are changing every day, I still try and sit down with my team all the time and challenge what we're currently doing and make sure we keep asking the question, but why? And then but then I'll ask another question, but why are we doing that? But why are we doing it? And a lot of times, if you keep asking those questions yourselves, you realize you kind of get to a point down, and you're like, okay, maybe we should be doing it that way.
Well, and that's a great growth mindset approach, Chris. And that's what I want to see. You know, but I want to see people being true in that sort of process as well, to really live the values of actually checking yourself and getting people around you and going, actually not approaching it from a victim mentality that actually does something about it. And I think that's the important bit. If HR is going to lift this perception of not adding value, then it needs to really sort of question why that is. And again, generalizing, why is that? I'm not saying every organization and every HR function around the world is like this, but on the whole, what I've seen through the book is that it's more the 80 rather than the 20.
Yeah, there's a stigma attached to it, of course. And I see where you're coming from, and I definitely agree. It's definitely happening as well. But we need to make sure like the HR leaders that I speak to that are the ones that are successful, that are pushing the boundaries. They say things to me like, you know what, Chris, if you want to do that, you have to be willing to lose your job.
Well, yeah,
You know, you have to be willing to put it all online and walk in that boardroom and say no to the CEO and say, this is what we're going to do. And if you do that, this is the impact it's going to have on the business, and, you know, and have a voice.
yeah.
And do it. But they said to me many times, literally, and this is not just one person, said, I am willing to lose my job to do what's right for the business, for our employees, and to push for this change. And there's not many leaders out there that will be willing to do that. And I can understand why. And I can fully understand why. But those are the ones that I'm sure will go on to be CEOs.
And that's the credibility point, isn't it, Chris? Is that real, true consulting? Because in the boardroom, in my mind, there should be three people who should absolutely be joined at the hips: the CEO, the chief financial director, and the chief people officer. Those three, as a triangle, should be sense checking the strategy of the organization, ensuring that they're actually bouncing ideas off each other. And if that doesn't exist, then if you only have two parts of the three, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, you know, when you ask about one of the things that needs to be changed, is that credibility in the board. And it's great to hear, Chris, that you've got people coming on the show who are willing to actually go in there from a credibility perspective and say, actually, listen to me, because I know what I'm talking about here. I have the commercial mindset. I know the right direction to go. Let's have that discussion, and let's come out with the best solution rather than a solution that doesn't fix everything.
And I spoke to someone recently, Matt Burns, who's a good friend of mine and former CHRO, and he said to me, Chris, do you know how I got my seat in the boardroom and got my credibility? And I was like, what? He's like, I picked up the seat, I walked in the boardroom and sat down. And he wasn't even he was being deadly serious about it as well. It's like, for far too long, I kind of waited for them to, ask me to join the meeting, or he's like, no, I took it into my own hands and said, if you want me to be part of this team and to be the CHRO of this organization, then this is how it's going to work, and I'm going to be part of these meetings.
Well,
so
that's great, Chris. I mean, great to hear that. But again, that's a growth mindset action. That is doing something, being willing to be brave, and actually put himself in a position there of actually not demanding, but demonstrating his credibility.
Yeah, and we're seeing it more. I'm seeing it grow now more and more. Like in the past, you'd see, like the conversation, like you mentioned earlier, will be CEO and CFO. Now it's actually seeing CEO, HRD, then CFO, in terms of the priority that organizations are putting. Because without the people strategy being aligned to the vision of the business, then nothing else is going to work.
Yeah. Until robots and AI take over completely, no story altogether. You've got to have that triangle. You've got to have that solid group of people who really sort of take the company or the business forward. It's really important.
So what advice then would you give then to aspiring, both established HR leaders, but also leaders that are aspiring that are currently on this journey?
Yeah, I mean, keep going, because ultimately there is evidence that actually there is value in HR directors becoming CEOs. Obviously, it goes without saying, please read the book. I mean, at the end of the day, if nothing else, it gives you a view of why HR is where it is today, how it's evolving, why it needs to change, because that's really important. But also look at what else can you do from a point of view of if you have that mindset of wanting to aspire to become a CEO or the best HRD in the world, look around you and say, are you bringing people along with you? I'm not saying that you have to be a member of the CIPD or another HR institution, but what are you doing to actually sort of talk about it? I'm lucky, I go into schools as well and talk to children and pupils around what is HR, so what more could they do? And challenge the negativity that's around HR right now, and raise the perception values up, because it truly does add value if it's being focused on doing the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. And I think that's the key bit, is that we potentially on the whole, and this is generalizing again, are falling into the trap of, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. But it's time to...
The worst thing we could do.
Say again, Chris, sorry?
So that's the worst thing we can do.
Yeah, it completely is, and I think it will never address this perception. And I'm a firm believer, as I said, Chris. I'm very passionate about what HR does. Hopefully, this comes over in this podcast, and I truly want this function to succeed. But it's time that actually the function on a whole stood up and actually looked in that mirror and said, okay, so where do we want it to be? What do we have to do now? What are we involved in? Are we just running stuff because we've always run it? Where's the value add? Are we releasing people to go and do what they need to go and do? Or are we tying them up in bureaucratic processes that truly just doesn't add value? And that's a question to answer.
It's a big question.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, Glenn, tell our listeners where they can, first and foremost, where they can grab a copy of the book. And then secondly, if they want to get in contact with you directly, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Chris. So my book is available. I'm useless as a salesperson, by the way. It's available on Amazon. It's also available in Waterstones and WH Smith, I believe. But Amazon's probably the main point. If you want to get in contact with me, I'm available on LinkedIn. I have my own website as well, which you can get access to via LinkedIn. But generally, I'm here if you want to ask questions, if you want to know more. One of the things I've built into the book, Chris, is I wanted to have that bi-directional conversation. I want people to tell me about what they think about the book and have I missed something, because ultimately for me, there's a 2.0 that I need to go on to here. I'm very passionate about taking this forward. I want to do a PhD and a DBA, or a DBA rather. So for me, is if I've missed something tangible, if I've got something wrong, then I'd love to hear it, because that's the whole point of development, and I continue to develop, and hopefully read the book and come back and let me know if you agree or disagree. That's fair.
Good. It's all about opening up that dialogue, right? And getting everyone involved. So, well, again, thank you so much for taking the time out to share your insights with our listeners. We really appreciate it. And I know we'll be a lot better off for it. So thank you so much for that. For everyone listening, guys, as always, head over to hrdleaders.com. There you'll find the show notes from the episode. Link to Glenn's book will be in there for you, so you can check it out. And also the details to get in contact with him directly. Thanks again so much for taking the time out to join us, Glenn, and I wish you all the best until we next speak.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chris. It's been a pleasure.